What is the cutest mistake you've ever seen someone make? Took my 2-year-old to pick up milk recently at the pharmacy near my house. Closest place to get milk. While waiting in line he ended up in front of the lady in front of me, leaning against her legs and sitting on her feet. She looked down and said hi, I'm not your mommy. He looked really panicked for a second, then saw me. Then he asked to carry the milk. I told him I didn't think he could, but he could try and set it in the floor. He lifted it maybe an inch off the ground, put it back down and sadly said, I too small. 6-year-old. Daddy, can you buy me a German? Me. A German? That's a person from Germany. You can't buy people. 6-year-old. But I want to write on it and make pictures like my friends. Me. I'm not sure they would like that. It took a couple of more questions for me to realize he wanted a journal, not a German. 6-year-old. Everybody's got a price. A few months ago my 6-year-old little girl was eating dinner. She let out a burp and said fart on me. I waited a minute and asked what she said. She explained I said fart on me. It's what you say when being polite. Me and my wife smiled and told her it's actually pardon me. You kink shamed your child. Not really a mistake per se but super cute. My friend's dad is Italian. They moved to Germany in the 60s and have lived here ever since. A few years ago, he was caught speeding, not very much over the limit, by a stationary speeding camera. He noticed the flash go off and asked his daughter what would happen now. She told him not to worry and that he'd get his ticket in the mail. But he was so worried about having broken the traffic laws that he went to the police station the day after and told them I did it. He was obviously asked to explain what he did and after telling them that he was the one who went above the speed limit yesterday, I guess the cops had a bit of a chuckle, thanked him and told him he'd get mail. Case closed. Boys, we got him. I was walking around a mall with my 4-year-old niece when she suddenly spotted a service dog wearing a vest, gasped and said look auntie, a superhero dog. She was not wrong. Good girl, good dog. Co-worker was born and raised in Armenia, had only lived in the United States for about 2 years. She mostly mastered the English language really quickly, except one day when she was leaving work, she pokes her head into the break room and says to us, okay guys, I'm leaving. Rest in peace. I think you mean peace out. What's the difference? Rest in peace is what you say to show respect for a dead person. That's what rest in peace means. Why didn't anyone tell me that? I've been saying it to customers for months. Enjoy your donuts. Rest in peace. That poor baby was crying his balls off. Indian grandmother, trying to say, he was bawling his eyes out. Almost the same thing but not quite. I told my 4-year-old cousin to let her dad know that his phone rang. She ran up to him and just started singing the ringtone back to him. So precious. AWW this reminds me of the time when we had just taught my sister how to use a telephone. One morning when my mom was feeling especially lazy she asked my sister to call her cell phone. My sister went off all around the house while my mom was in fits of laughter shouting cell phone. My father is a now retired FBI agent, but back in the day, if he had to carry his gun with him in public, he would put it in a fanny pack because he always said who would ever expect an FBI agent to be the dork wearing a fanny pack anyway. We were visiting my grandmother in the hospital who wasn't all there. He was wearing tan pants and his trusty black fanny pack. My grandmother took one look at him and said why the heck are you wearing a Speedo? Burt Macklin, FBI. I visited my mother. She told me her internet is not working and wanted me to fix it. I looked at the Wi-Fi router and found she plugged the Ethernet cable from the Wi-Fi router to the same router, creating a loop and not being connected to anything else. Not seen, but heard. It's the story of how my stepdad and mom met. He was teaching a basic computing course back in the 90s, and my mom was, and still is, very technologically inept. She was having some problems with a word processing document, and needed help with something. So my stepdad comes over to her desk, and figures out the problem in a couple of seconds. Instead of fixing it for her, he considered it a learning opportunity and guided her through fixing it herself. Okay, so right click here, and my mom wrote the word click. He says it was both hilarious and adorable, and took all that he had not to burst out laughing. My mom is always embarrassed whenever he tells the story. One time my mom and I were visiting my then 80-year-old grandmother, and my mom had recently bought herself a Nintendo DS. So she gets it out to show Nana and says, "Oh hey mom, I wanted to show you this neat thing I got." Nana looked at it and said innocently, "Oh, is that a Twitter?" There was a young guy on the train, probably early 20s, who was telling me he had pretty much never left his tiny hometown and was on the way to the city to start his new job. He was on the phone to his mom, incredulous that there were no seatbelts on the train. There's a law in my country saying that every bus must have seatbelts. I never saw a bus with seatbelts. Nobody cares for that law. When my now ex-GF came to visit me in London during her spring break, I was walking around Heathrow looking for her at arrivals and she saw me first. She sprang up to run to me and tripped over her bags. It was the cutest moment of my life. I had gone on a couple dates with a Brazilian girl. She was a foreign exchange student, and her English wasn't the greatest. The first time we were going to hang out alone, I let her know I was on my way. She responded with butterflies on my belly. To this day it makes me smile. Overheard my cute and somewhat ditzy co-worker at work answer the phone. She asked his name and then paused. "Well, which is it, Jose Ortega?" Obviously his name was Jose Ortega. Everyone around her couldn't contain their laughter. This sounds like it would make an amazing joke in the office. My mom moved to the United States from Germany, and the first time she went grocery shopping she was amazed at all the things you could buy in cans. She excitedly came home with a can that showed a beautiful cooked turkey on the side. It was Crisco. At a big box store, trying to keep my kids occupied while my wife checked out, told my 3-year-old it was time to leave, and she went tearing after a woman who was dressed the same as my wife, opened her arms and hugged the lady from behind with her face planted into the lady's rear end. I was laughing, the lady was laughing, the 3-year-old was scared and confused. I remember being in a department store eating a lollipop. I wanted to check something out, so I asked my mom to hold it with oink looking, and she took it. I got an odd feeling and looked up, and there was this poor employee dude holding my lollipop for me. Friend and her family, except for her mother, are extremely clumsy. One time, her father got locked out of the house, waited for her to come home, but she also forgot her keys, so they waited for her brother, who also forgot his keys, so they ended up all waiting for the mother outside. When the kids I work with accidentally call me mom and then get all flustered, I know they're mortified, but it's super cute. In 4th grade I had a mid-40s male teacher with a huge beard. One girl accidentally called him mom once. It was the funniest thing that ever happened in elementary school. Was at my local Target where a little girl, maybe like 4, was with her parents. She was twirling around in circles and completely face planted into the ground. Like face down butt up face plant. I was expecting full-blown tears and screaming to enrage from this child, but instead she happily sang "I'm okay" and got up and twirled again. Thought it was the cutest thing in the world. When I was younger I had one of those brain trainer games for my DS. One of the mini games would show you a color written in a different color, if that makes sense. Like the word purple written in yellow text. And you had to say the color of the text into the microphone as quickly as you could. I guess to test your brain power or whatever. My little brother, about 7 at the time, was very good at this game for someone his age, but hadn't quite gotten the hang of pronouncing his R's yet. My parents and I would sit there in silent stitches listening to him angrily yell "wed" into the DS 15 times over, while it failed to recognize what he was saying. It was so cute. Fun fact, that game is easier when you're younger. Kids that age haven't been reading long enough to automatically read the written word, which is why it's harder for adults. My husband and I were on our 3rd date when he suddenly looked up from his food and asked, "Are we on a date?" After a moment of confusion, I informed him that we were, in fact, on a date and that it was our 3rd. Oh, good. I'd been hoping. Evidently, he had a number of girlfriends in the past who took going out to eat as the same as hanging out. He'd usually insist on paying because he's a nice guy and held 2 jobs. His response to me telling him it was our 3rd date simultaneously melted my heart and stabbed my self-esteem straight in the head. I just started dating a girl who has clinical resting B face, an angry walk, and a monotone voice. She also has a sarcastic streak. We get along great over text messages and have decent conversations, but she just looked like she wanted to beat me up. Spent more time than I care to admit wondering whether we were actually dating or not. Ended up just asking her outright. A while ago I was in the mall on a crowded day when suddenly I felt a tiny hand clasp my palm. A little girl, maybe 5, had mistaken me for her mom and held my hand and started wrapping herself around my leg. It was so sweet and I knew it would frighten her when I pointed out her mistake, but when I did, her confused expression was priceless. She continued to hold my hand while we walked around looking for her mom. It was extra cute because I remember doing that myself as a kid. My 4-year-old stepkid was going on and on for like 2 straight breathless minutes about how her school handled a bit of bad weather. But it took us a while to understand that because we couldn't figure out why she kept saying we had to hide from the potatoes. Tornadoes. A story my mom loves to tell is the time I kept talking about which animals were the turtle or not a turtle. She kept asking me which animals I thought were the turtle. Dog equals the turtle. Cat equals not a turtle. Turtle equals I don't know. Until she figured it out. Not the turtle equals nocturnal. My, then, 7-year-old nephew and I were watching a TV show, and one of the characters called another girl a butterface to insult her. My nephew looked at me with confusion, said butterface, and looked back at the TV. I was about to explain to him what that insult meant, but then a look of comprehension crossed his face. Oh, 'cause she's got blonde hair, so her bangs look like a hunk of butter on her forehead. I get it. I thought his definition was hilarious, so I didn't bother correcting him. You didn't correct him and he probably called some other blonde a butterface. The hostesses at the restaurant I work at are all about high school age and I love them dearly. Anyways, one day our manager gives one of them the wine special for the day to write on the chalkboard by the entrance. This girl didn't know much about wines and had trouble reading the manager's handwriting, so instead of writing Pinot Grigio on the board, she wrote Pinot Grigio. Now it's really hard for me to talk about Pinot Grigio without calling it Pinot Grigio just cause it tickles me. Not as cute, but I had a new server ask the chef owner of the restaurant I was working at how to pronounce Pauly Foussé and he just turned to her and shouted, P filet. So, I shout P filet in my head whenever I'm buying wine. I was at my grandma's house and she had a drawing on the fridge that my kindergarten age cousin had done. He and my aunt were living with my grandma at the time. Above the stick family and sheep it said, in scrawly 5-year-old style handwriting to Mom love Marky. And I said who is Mom? Marky looks up at me and as incredulously as possible scoffs and says that says mommy, like I'm the 17-year-old dumbass that can't read. So now we all call our mothers Mom. We were hiking on a trail and passed a little boy, about 4, and his parents. Missed what led up to it, but he suddenly yelled, I'm getting mad over here very dramatically, and stomped to the edge of the path. We burst out laughing, and the parents cracked up too. This was years ago, but we still randomly say that we're getting mad over here. I love the kind of inside jokes you form with people that last for years after over the smallest, insignificant moments just like this one. Was in a waiting room in a hospital and a little girl asked her father what was on his name tag. The father told her it was his name, and the little girl said I thought daddy was your name he. I can remember having a friend over at my house when I was a kid. He asked me what my mom's name was, and I actually had no idea. I had to go ask her. My so is a fluent but non-native English speaker. One night, he was talking about a particular event and how everyone would wear tuxedos and nightgowns. Took me a second to realize that he meant evening gowns, but I thought it was adorable. Yet another genuinely weird moment in the English language. I've got a friend named Preeti. One time Preeti and I were volunteering at an elementary school as part of our high school community service organization, and we were introduced to the kids, around 6-7 as Ms. Time traveling ninja and Ms. Preeti. When one of the kids asked Preeti to go to the bathroom, the kid said Ms. Beautiful and it was all I could do to not say or right in front of the kid. I honestly had a 5-second hesitation on the reasons leading a person to introduce herself as Ms. Time traveling ninja to 6-7 kids. I got it now. We had a new girl in my office. She was very bubbly, so she fit right in when everyone was joshing around. One day, we all got sushi and she said, "I love wasabi," then eats a giant glob of wasabi and runs out of the room with tears coming from her eyes and sweat pouring out of her face. It was really cute. We gave her a hard time about it. That's something you never let a person live down, not at their wedding nor funeral. Once I worked as a cashier in IKEA. A man came and he had his 5-year-old son with him. While I was beeping the items, his son kept asking me if I wanted to become daddy's girlfriend, and when his father tried to silence him he just yelled, "But why can't she be your girlfriend?" over and over again. Super cute. He probably trained the kid to do that on the off chance you'd think it was cute enough to go out with him. My husband had surgery and was having a really rough time coming out of anesthesia. Didn't know where he was or why. From the things he was saying, he was about 10 years in the past, before we met. Husband: "Who are you?" Me: "I'm your wife." H: "I'm married." Me: "Yep." H: "No, you are much too pretty to be my wife." It was pretty heartbreaking in the moment, but funny in retrospect. It took 3-4 hours, but eventually he remembered me and the rest of his life again. I took my niece, 7 years old, to a restaurant yesterday and we sat at a high top with my friend. My niece and I were getting up to wash our hands and she fell off of her chair. I picked her up and walked to the bathroom. She was crying and I asked her if she hurt anything and she said, "No, Caitlin, just my pride." I was at the Air and Space exhibit at the local museum. They had an area on aliens and robots. There was a life-size Iron Man, C-3PO, and an R2-D2. Little girl, maybe 3 or 4, runs up to R2. I know him. He's in that movie her dad goes, "You do know him. What's his name?" the little girl exclaims. "Pokemon." I couldn't stop laughing. It was the sweetest thing. When my brother was in college, the neighboring sorority went into his campus house and labeled just about everything with sticky notes. I'm not really sure what exactly the joke was, but I guess that was their idea of a wholesome prank. My brother's housemate was a super sweet exchange student from China. He thanked them for the nice surprise, because he thought they were trying to help him with his English. My boyfriend had a brain injury 4 months ago. He was in a coma for about a week and when he woke he had to relearn how to speak coherently all over again. The speech therapist had a session with me present so that I could practice these lessons with him at home. He, the therapist, would say a word and my boyfriend would have to give him a synonym or definition. The therapist said happiness and my boyfriend pointed to me and said my name. I did a weird mixture of crying, laughing, and the therapist told him no, that's incorrect, and my boyfriend pouted and frowned and didn't quite understand his mistake. It's a memory I think of a lot when we're going through a particularly rough patch. Playing the drinking game Kings, a 10 was pulled for categories. For those unfamiliar, it's a card-based drinking game using a standard deck where each card represents a different game that is played, usually ending with drinks. Categories means that someone names a category of things and everyone has to go around naming something from that category. If you fail to name something, you drink. So I chose a category 80s hairbands, expecting answers like Whitesnake or Tesla. This young girl was the first person to go, and she confidently yells a scrunchie. She technically wasn't wrong. After purchasing a box of Girl Scout cookies, the young Girl Scout tried to say thank you but got flustered and yelled out Happy Hanukkah. This was in March. When I was in high school we had a teacher's assistant who was hearing impaired, hard of hearing. One day the guy was working on his laptop and it made an alert sound and he blocked the screen with his hand to muffle the sound. My friend thought that the word melancholy meant happy. He was constantly wandering around joyfully exclaiming, "God, I feel so melancholy. Melancholy." I was at a tank museum, war museum that had everything from Civil War artifacts to modern stuff. They also do weddings, events, and all kinds of stuff. I was there with my dad, and he was looking at a tank. I was sitting on a bench taking in the smells and scenery when I overheard a small child talking to his dad. The father told his son they needed to get home so the kid could nap, and the kid, being a kid, decided to talk back and come at his father with this line, "I don't want to take a nap. You take a nap." I have never seen a grown man's eyes light up as fast as his did. Little girl in the grocery store was having an argument with her parents. She looked like she was maybe 4 or 5. My husband and I round the corner and this girl looks at us, then her parents, then us, and comes running down the aisle. I'm going to go live with them and they will be my new mommy and daddy because you're mean. My husband adores kids, and I am very obviously pregnant. We smiled at her parents and they said, "Oh, well, Mr. and Mrs. New dad and mom, good luck with her," before turning their cart and walking away. The girl gets this brief panicked expression and I shouted, "Hey wait." Parents turned around. "Does she have allergies or anything?" "Nope. She's healthy as a horse. She does need a nightlight though." "Oh, that's too bad we don't have nightlights." This girl let go of my husband's shirt tail and hauled back to her parents so fast she looked like a cartoon character running. "I don't really need that toy. I love you." You could tell she really re-evaluated her choices up to that point, and it was adorable. This is the most adorable thing I've read. Not one I saw but did myself. So when I was younger, about 10, I went with my father to get the car cleaned at the car wash. Now I saw a sign that said full Polish, so I proceeded to ask my dad, "Why do they only hire Polish people here?" He about died laughing and would bring it up for years. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.